Preparing for today, my office has heard from veterans who have shared stories of the heroism and solidarity of many Afghans who served alongside them, and asked that we not condemn the many for the inexcusable act of one person. And I know there's a number of veterans here in the audience today. Could the veterans and the battle buddies in the audience please stand for a moment? Thank you. And I thank you, we thank you for your service and for being here today to support the allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with all American service members. But let me ask about the screening and vetting of the people who are here as witnesses. Mr. Adelman, the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General report to make clear that your audits compared the parole screening and vetting processes to the Special Immigrant Visa Program and U.S. refugee processing, and that the Operation Allies Welcome parole screening included biometric and biographic screening at lily pad locations, plus manifest vetting and CBP inspection at ports of entry. Can you briefly walk us through the layered process so the public understands what screening and vetting meant in practice?
Yes, thank you. CBP and DoD collected both, as you mentioned, biographic and biometric, including facial images and fingerprints. While the evacuees were at the lily pads, they matched that information against government databases throughout the federal government. Once a decision was made when they were allowed to travel to the United States, CBP put together a manifest for each flight. They did another round of vetting of that manifest, and then they were allowed to fly over into the United States. At that point, they went through the normal inspection process that everyone would go through when they reach a U.S. port of entry, which is the inspection process run by CBP. If CBP found something, they would take them to secondary, or expected to.
Thank you. And just quickly, would you agree that your reports ultimately found that these processes were indeed followed, yes or no?
Generally speaking, the vast majority, it was followed. The challenge was the
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Brown, from the perspective of the Department of State, do you agree as well that these processes were followed, yes or no?
Senator, we reviewed 112 SIV files in the context of our audit, looking at steps required to protect national security, and found that all State Department required steps were conducted in the sample for SIVs that we
Thank you very much.
Would it be fair to say, Mr. Baker, that the level of vetting required under the Special Immigrant Visa Program that you testified about, that Senator Padilla mentioned, that vetting process was far more stringent than what was required by the Biden administration for Afghan parolees?
Senator, yes, I think I would agree with that. However, I would caveat it by saying we have not looked at or have oversight responsibilities for the parole program to compare and contrast.
This man accused in the tragic shooting of 2 National Guard members, we've not seen any indication there was a failure in actual vetting. Instead, there was a failure to respond to urgent requests made by his family members and volunteers about deteriorating mental health. Mr. Baker, you made reference to that already. Isn't this a real gap in the process that we can go through and check the boxes one after the other, and miss the obvious problem that could have led to saving the life of this National Guardsman and the one who was injured?
I can't talk to the assessment of the particular individual. Overall, I would say that the interview that's conducted when someone applies for benefits would be an opportunity to get to know the person and see if there's any challenges there.
Wouldn't it be better for us to take a lesson from this about how we can improve this process in the future rather than just shutting down any access of asylees into the United States from 39 different countries? I would like to see us do something positive and bipartisan and really make this a safer system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I think for DOD, if the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security can implement the 2 remaining open recommendations, I think that would go a long way to improving this in the future.
All right, well, let's get to work. Let's work together to make sure that we keep the American people safe.
May I first ask if any of the witnesses on this panel served in Afghanistan?
I did not.
No.
No?
I traveled there as a civilian to do my OIG oversight work.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is because I think one important voice for a hearing like this is the men and women who served in Afghanistan and who worked closely with Afghan soldiers and intelligence operatives, very often very closely, very often with their security determined by the capability of their Afghan colleagues. And when the issue of Afghan resettlement came up, the voices that I heard the most were the voices of Rhode Islanders who had served in Afghanistan, other Americans who had served in Afghanistan, and whose message to us was, many of us owe our lives to these Afghan soldiers. We have a moral duty to protect them and to give them an opportunity to come to the United States and not leave them to the tender mercies of the Taliban. Do any of you disagree that the service of Afghan troops and intelligence professionals gave them some moral standing in an effort to relocate to the United States?
No.
Mr. Edelman does not disagree with that? Is that no, no, and no? No. Well, I happen to agree with you, and I wish that voice was more prevalent here. I've also been told, and if anybody cares to correct me in a response for the record, you're welcome to do so. But I've been told that the number of Afghans who have entered on parole into the United States under Operation Allies Welcome is 76,000. And that of those 76,000, as of a report from the Department of Homeland Security in December, 6 had been arrested. 76,000 brought into the United States, 6 have been arrested. By my count, more January 6 rioters pardoned by President Trump were arrested after the pardon than our Afghan allies brought into this country under Operation Allies Welcome. So I hope as we go forward, we consider what our obligation was to those Afghan soldiers and intelligence operatives, translators, IED technicians who served beside our troops, often protected them, sometimes at the cost of injury and loss of life to themselves. Particularly where the numbers, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but 6 out of 76,000 getting arrested, that's like less than 0.1%. We're not exactly dealing with this dangerous intrusion into our country when those are the actual numbers. So I wanted to make those points because I think a hearing like this should reflect the views of the Americans who served in all the different stages of our activities in Afghanistan from those earliest days when our special forces teams went in and charged around on horseback in the mountains, only able to operate because of the support of Afghan allies, all the way through until the departure from Afghanistan that was driven by a very unfortunate agreement entered into by President Trump.
Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity and thank you for your service to this country. May God bless all of y'all. I come here as a witness to provide my experiences with Afghanistan and American citizen evacuation. I submit this testimony as an American born abroad to a foreign mother, a son of a soldier, and as a retired soldier myself, who has spent a lifetime at the point where policy and consequence meet. We lost National Guard Specialist Sarah Beckstrom. May God rest her soul. Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf remains in our prayers as he fights to recover. Their sacrifice deserves remembrance, and it deserves justice. Full justice against the perpetrator and anyone who comes to this country with the intent to do harm. There must be no ambiguity to this point. Violence against American service member is an attack on the nation itself, and it must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. It is critical, though, that I speak clearly and honestly at this point. The person who perpetrated this crime does not represent the Afghan people I fought beside. Not that I advocated for, nor that I continue to support. Conflating lawful allies with violent criminals dishonors both our fallen soldiers and the Afghans who kept faith with us. I served in the United States Army for decades, retiring as a lieutenant colonel after multiple combat tours. I was the first soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I was proud to be part of it all. Some judge a career by rank or awards. The men I measured success with, we measured it differently. We measured by lives preserved and promises kept. When we arrived in Afghanistan, we were met by a local Afghan partner, a warlord, a U.S. government personnel, and they welcomed our presence, but they also warned us the enemy was everywhere. Nobody was coming to rescue us if things went wrong. This was a Special Forces mission at its core, and it should never have been anything else. People came from all over the world to kill Americans. Let's not forget that. Even Americans came to kill Americans. It was confusing to our Afghan allies. And yet, our partners stood beside us. They fought beside us, and they translated not just language, but culture. They helped us understand tribal dynamics, honor, and consequence. They bled, they died, they lived. They became like us. They cursed like us. They dipped Copenhagen. They tried their best at American jokes. And they believed deeply in that America meant something, that we meant something. Who cannot forget that we actually secured polling places so Afghans could vote? The world remembers images of women holding up ink-stained fingers, proving that they voted. Girls went to school. Men worked without fear of reprisal. That progress was not abstract. It was earned, block by block, village by village, firefight by firefight. We did it together. That is why what happened in August 2021 shook me to the core. The world watched Afghans as they clung to aircraft, as we saw Senator Cruz so eloquently display. It was sickening. I felt sick. But we made a promise. We taught our youngest privates to model American values to the Afghan people. What we are, who we are, the promises of loyalty, accountability, and honor as Americans. And then we left. I just couldn't stand by. I put my personal information out on all the social media websites I could and said, if you need help, contact me. I'm not sure what I'm doing yet, but we're going to do something right. And we did. People from across the globe responded, veterans and civilians. We formed networks overnight to save lives. It quickly became clear that this effort would require resources. So I established a nonprofit, and not 1 cent has ever been provided to me by the U.S. government to my organization. Every dollar came from me and private citizens and veterans. We established strict criteria to advocate for our Afghans. First, we worked to rescue American citizens. I'm proud to say our networks of advocates helped over 2,000 American citizens return home after the fall of Afghanistan. One of them was a woman named Sarah, who had been imprisoned by the Taliban. We freed her and 2 young girls by moving them into Pakistan with the help of our Afghan partners that we still had touch points with in Afghanistan. that were willing to do that and still await their disposition. Eventually, we got Sarah back, but not before she told me, I want to stay in Pakistan and help these women. The 2 girls she fought so hard to save remain stranded today. Second, you had to have worked with U.S. personnel, and you had to prove it. Hotak, who was a mechanic, was at the airport, and he didn't have the proper paperwork for his youngest daughter. We spoke earlier about birth dates. Birth dates is a cultural thing. It's foreign to us, and it's hard for us to wrap our mind around. They don't really, it's not important to them. What's important to them is their family and their family lineage. He did not have the proper paperwork for his youngest daughter. So believing that they would be reunited shortly in Humanitarian City, he boarded the airplane with his 2 sons. When he arrived in the United States, he immediately went to work because he was not reunited yet. For the first time in his life, he became a single parent raising 2 elementary school-aged children in an unfamiliar country, navigating confusing rules, systems, and unfamiliar laws. What is FICA? He had no idea. For 3 years, he worked, waited, and hoped. And finally, in 2024, he was reunited with his family. Third, you had to meet the State Department's requirements. We wanted you here legally. We did everything we could. They did the processing. We did not sign a single piece of paperwork to help an Afghan. We just sent them to the website. But even with those standards, the system nearly collapsed. 13, and we talked about this earlier, of our finest were killed at HKIA because of an IED attack and leadership failures. Nowhere in our doctrine do we allow the enemy inside of our perimeter. And that moment marked the end of an orderly evacuation. Conflating lawful allies with violent criminals, though, dishonors both our fallen soldiers and the Afghans who kept faith with us. A Marine who later became an advocate, was there during the fall of Kabul and witnessed his interpreter step in front of gunfire to protect him and his unit. He and his men cleared the HKIA runway and stood over Murder Alley, a stretch of dirt road they could see and will never, ever forget. That is the fate of those who we left behind. That is the real life and death consequences of turning our backs on those who risked their lives for our country. This hearing is about the Afghan Parole Program and the CIV program. Programs like this exist because of our credibility. I believe our credibility matters to the world. Because when America makes a promise in war, people do stake their lives on it.
Colonel, if you wouldn't mind wrapping up, because we had 5 minutes per witness, and then give us a chance to ask you some questions and you can further expound on it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. In closing, our soldiers deserve justice, our allies deserve honor, and our nation deserves the truth. Thank you for their time.
Thank you, Chairman Corian, Chairman Hawley, Ranking Member Durbin, Ranking Member Padilla, and other members of Subcommittee for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Nadeem Youssefi. I'm a naturalized American citizen, a United States Marine sergeant, a future nurse. I'm hereby today as an example of what successful refugee resettlement and integration looks like when it's grounded in service accountability, commitment to this country. I'm testifying in my personal capacity today, and my views do not represent those of the United States Marine Corps. From 2010 to 2015, I served in Afghanistan as an interpreter in direct support of U.S. Department of Justice Drug Enforcement Administration. I did not simply translate words. I translated intents, warnings, and threats. I helped American personnel operate safely in an environment where misunderstanding would cost lives. Working alongside American service members shaped who I am today. I saw their discipline, their professionalism, their willingness to risk everything for one another. I was inspired by that example. My family has a long tradition of military service. After graduating high school, I followed in my older brother's footsteps, and I committed myself to serving alongside Americans we respected so deeply. Because of this work, I became a target for the drug traffickers, Taliban, and other insurgent groups. Like many Afghan allies, my service put my life and my family lives at risk. After years of documented service and extensive vetting, I later migrated to United States through the SIV, or Special Immigration Visa. I want to be very clear about what the process looked like. The SIV process required years of interviews, background investigation, biometric screenings, and continuous repeated reviews by multiple U.S. government agencies. Every detail of my history was examined. It was an obstacle course. Once I arrived to the United States, immediately I enlisted in the U.S. military. I did not pass my ASVAB. I got 18. So I have to go back to school to improve my English and my math in order to get a better ASVAB score and finally enlist in the Marine Corps with a 67 ASVAB. I had 2 deployments back-to-back in my first active duty, and I spoke 4 languages, and I tested all 4 of them for the DoD. Today, I'm a nursing student and inactive reserve status. My goal is to return to active duty and serve as an officer in Army Nurse Corps because I want to continue serving this country and caring for those who do. I hope my children and grandchildren will one day serve as well. When they're dead, they will be buried with American flag on top of their casket. I have also been deeply involved in supporting undersettled Afghan in my community since 2021. I helped navigate families in a new country, find stability, build futures-rooted responsibility and contribution. Service did not end when uniform came off. It's the way of life. I understand the concern raised in this hearing. National security matters. Public safety matters. No one who served alongside Americans like I did would ever dispute that. I also acknowledge the tragic incident involving a fellow service member. I lost a sister in arms. Specialist Beckstrom, may her soul rest in peace. I extend my deepest condolences to her family and her unit, and a brother, Staff Sergeant Wolf, who is currently recovering from injuries. Their sacrifice deserves respect and seriousness. But it is essential to separate individual criminal acts from the reality of entire population that was vetted, tested, and proven through the service. Because of their service, many Afghan allies paid deadly price, with estimates of more than 300 interpreters and their family members killed because of their association with the U.S. forces during their service in a targeted attack, afterwards, or while waited for promised SIV visas. Many others were threatened, forced into hiding, or assassinated quietly without headlines. Like any system oversight and improvements are necessary, criminal acts must be addressed swiftly. Accountability must be affirmed and uncompromising, but accountability should be individual, not collective. One person's crime should never erase the sacrifice of 10,000 who stood with the American service members under fire. How we treat...
Please wrap up your opening remarks, please.
I believe in America. I ever lived here. That belief led me to serve as an interpreter, then as a Marine, now as a future nurse. I'm not unique. There are thousands like me who continue to serve quietly every day, and most of them are right behind me, sitting in this hall currently present. Security and compassion are not opposite. Strong vetting and moral responsibility can and must exist together. America is safest when it keeps both its borders and its word. Thank you for your time, Senators.
So I just have questions. First of all, to you, Mr. Yousefi, Sergeant, it is widely known that the motto of the Marines is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. And as I see it, you have lived up to that motto twice over, first as an interpreter for the U.S. government and then as a U.S. Marine. What have those words meant to you? And as you remember other Afghans who also served and sacrificed alongside U.S. forces, how should the idea of being faithful apply to them?
Semper Fidelis, Madam Senator. The motto of Semper Fidelis, we know that it goes back long history in the Marine Corps, but meeting at this time, being always faithful is the people, the communities that I'm involved with in Michigan. There's like over 200 communities, which are most of them are from 0 units, and they are proving it every day by paying their taxes, by going to their work, by sending their kids to school, by making their doctor appointments, by making sure that they live to the American standards, and they are every day doing their best to make this place home.
Thank you very much. Mr. Blackburn, thank you for your remarkable service in uniform as a Green Beret and for your dedication to helping Afghan allies. As you know, many veterans organizations, American Legion, VFW, support the bipartisan legislation that I just referenced to provide Afghans who undergo additional vetting with some kind of a pathway to permanent residency. Our bipartisan bill with several Republicans would apply the comprehensive vetting standard used in other parole status cases. And again, we're open to improving this, but it's something that has not been done in any systematic way. And you need a carrot and a stick here, and I really think that we need to look at something like this. Biometrics, in-person interviews, checks by all relevant security and intel agencies, medical screenings, and then getting conditional status. And then again, the Department of Homeland Security would have to verify. As I noted, this was part of an earlier border agreement. Can you elaborate on why American veterans have been some of the most outspoken supporter of the Afghan allies, from helping during the withdrawal to supporting resettlement to standing alongside them in their immigration hearings?
Yes, ma'am. I think earlier someone on the senators spoke to a moral injury, and I believe that's exactly what happened when we saw the fall of in August of 2021 with our Afghan partners. And from that point, we felt the need to do something positive to affect their lives. And that's why we came together in these mesh networks to try to figure out what to do, but to do it legally. As you spoke to just now about the bill that you guys have pending, that process is what we wanted to be part of. We wanted to be part of something positive to help people that worked with us, that fought with us, that died alongside of us, and their families. And we just could not turn our back on them, even though we were going through a pretty catastrophic event at the time.
Right.
So that is why I believe veterans and myself and others have poured their life. Some of us have poured our life savings into this. I know that sounds strange.
I know you have, and it's about keeping this covenant.
Yes, ma'am.
The people that stood up for you, and I appreciate that.
The oppresso liber
Yeah.
is liberate the oppressed, and that's what we're doing.
We cannot replace Sarah Beckstrom. Let me make this clear. But the only thing I want to emphasize is crime is individual. We cannot collectively punish all the Afghans, specifically and especially those who served among us, who served with us, and who are serving among us right now. Right behind me, it takes a lot of courage to come here in front of the camera when you have family back home in Afghanistan, when the Taliban are doing this to your homes and coming there and tearing apart everything. It doesn't take just a courage to come here to enlist and start the service, do 4 years active, 5 years reserve. It takes a courage to come here and be in front of the world, to watch you, to expose what's going on. We don't see this in the media. We don't see this. And I have right now over tens of National Guard and Reserve. They have T5 clearance, which is secret, top secret clearance, because they were working with Intel. Their families are stuck in Qatar. Their families are stuck in Kabul hiding. And if you Google any of our names right now, you will see we will pop up in some DVIDs or one of the websites. So the only thing that I'm asking, I came forward to talk here is, because I see that we're collectively punishing by literally stopping the SIV program and not keeping our words. And these pictures do not lie.
Before I turn to Mr. Blackburn, one specific question for you, Mr. Yousefi. A couple of my colleagues have raised the issue of being able to remember your birth date. I think you have a unique appreciation for what that means from an Afghan perspective. Can you comment just quickly?
Absolutely. So Afghanistan has been in a war for over 40 years. For that 40 years, how many people were educated? The educated ones will have their birthdays remembered, because my mom, when I was born, she wrote it in her notebook because she was a physician assistant. But among all these people that were working in the U.S., they were not all interpreters. They were mechanics, they were workers, they were KBR workers that were cleaning the base, beautification, guards, so many things. Most of them did not came from educated family. They would look at you, they'd be like, all right, you look 13-year-old, go ahead, you're 13. You have to choose your birthday.
That's
Thank
helpful,
you.
very helpful. Thank you. Mr. Blackburn.
Yeah, along with that also, my first 0102, we were in host Afghanistan, and we actually, our medics would go help help with the birthing process of Afghan women. There was no certificate given, there was no identification given. It was just something, that was how the world worked at that time. So I would also like to speak to vetting. As far as the touch points that we have, people like Nadim were vetted because they worked with us. So we had a personal touch point. You had to have a personal touch point with anybody that we would recommend or helped with food and safe housing. Biometrics, this is 2025. I think we should probably figure something out with that. And then we could get away from the conversation about, particular dates. The other thing is I'm extremely proud of y'all and proud to be here with all of you guys, the entire Senate panel, to hear you guys work through this process, because we've given our life to security to this country. We don't want it to stop. So whatever it takes, let's do this. We got this. We can do this, but we should not lose our humanity in the process. Mental health, we spoke about that. Y'all spoke about that quite a lot. I think it's very difficult being a soldier who does not have a mental health issue to recognize people and understand why someone does have a mental health issue, particularly with our soldiers that are committing suicide. I just don't understand it, and many of us don't. And so we wrestle with it. What I wrestle with mostly is why I can't understand it better and help them. So post-entry to the United States, I believe becomes very important for anyone that we bring here. There needs to be some level of oversight. There needs to be some level of supervision, and it's good governance to do that. And we do that in our networks. We do not leave our partners alone. We help them through the process, and I think it's very important. The other 77,000 folks that y'all are speaking to, I can't speak to that. I'm just speaking to the people that we help, like Nadim and others. It's critical. It's what makes us different from anybody else in this world, is our humanity and how we approach it. So thank you for that.
Thank you very, very much.
The presumption that vetting should be applied is absolutely right, but there should also be a presumption that we keep our promises and allow these public servants who helped our troops and diplomats to come to this country. I would like to ask you, Mr. Yousefi, how the promise to come to this country figured into your helping our troops. Did you rely on that promise?
I absolutely did. I can't say for the operation security reasons the name of my agents, special agents, and my intelligence analysts that I work with. And it wasn't for them, I would be 6 feet deep somewhere in Afghanistan right now, laying down. So this was a big change to me in my life. They gave me a new life, basically. So that's why I owe this country a lot. And that's how I feel like I will be paying back through my service to this country.
And you will continue to pay back to this country?
Absolutely. The service never stops.